Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everyone. Thank you for being here today and welcome to our Arts and NFT Showcase. So today I promise in the next 30 minutes we won't have the time to debunk non-fungible tokens on the blockchain, but we're really here to shed light on the potential of NFTs and the creative processes from an artist, but also from a business side of things. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our today's speaker, which are Ola Volo. Ola Volo is a world-renowned muralist, artist, and painter who has recently delved into NFTs. So her work is really inspired by her Slavic, Ola, you come from Kazakhstan, so we can really recognize her visual signature through her folklore, culturalism, and a lot of identity specifically to her work that you will see in just a few minutes. Ola has worked with brands and international clients such as Louis Vuitton, Starbucks, and Volkswagen. She continues to evolve through different mediums through her artwork, and today we're really excited to talk about a recent collaboration that she did with Nifty Gateway. And then we have co-curator from Art Rapture, Ryan E. Watson. Ryan is a fine art practitioner who has well-traveled the world, and he developed a lifelong journey of collecting and collaborating with the world's best artists. Ryan is currently at Art Rapture, continues to work with established artists in producing solo shows, exhibitions, and limited edition prints, merchandise, and such on. He is also offering guidance for artists to navigate this new and thriving world that is NFT and the blockchain. So without further ado, maybe I'd like to see a little bit of your work concerning the recent project with Nifty Gateway.
Nice. Nice.
That was just a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago on Nifty Gateway.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and Gab, thank you so much for that introduction. That was so beautiful, and it's new for me being an NFT artist, but again, not so new because it's been almost a year and a half now that we've been diving into making different collections with different platforms like Known Origin, OpenSea, Foundation, and now Nifty Gateway. So I initially got interested in NFTs because a lot of my process is, as an artist, I dive into, specifically into mural work. It's so interesting for me because public art, in order to create a mural for me, I need to go through this whole process of sketching and doing digital work, getting approved by the client, making sure it's, on par with their expectations.
Of course.
So many revisions go through that, and part of that process has been visual. So for me, when this opportunity to, really dive into the digital art as part of that process and celebrate it and refine it better, it was like a natural way to just keep telling my story.
I love that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say about that specifically, when people ask mostly to us, like at Art Rapture, what makes an artist go from physical work to the digital space, right? Not necessarily about cryptocurrencies or blockchain specifically, but the idea of using that digital work, but it be still collectible, right?
Exactly.
So when we look at your work, when you first, like what you still do to this day, but it's public art, like you just said. So it's on concrete, it's on big 60-foot buildings or 25 by 20s or what have you, and people can see them from all over. So just asking you the question back, like how did you kind of take to going from these kind of big mural, and then like Gabrielle said, work with Louis Vuitton and Volkswagen, how did you take like that and bring it to digital,
I think when it comes to work, art in my perspective is, I always believe in accessible art. I always loved when whether it was when I was doing commercial advertising with my artwork, whether I was doing public art, and now in the NFT space, it's all about sharing my visual language, which is very specific to my background. I come from Kazakhstan, so a lot of my artwork, it has a Slavic background, and yet I merge it with this modern folklore, and it feels to me very universal. And when I had the opportunity to put it into that space, in the NFT space, in that digital space, for me, it was exactly those beliefs of making artwork that's worldly, that is accessible, that you can see and enjoy and be, taken into a different world in just with a click of a button.
Love it. I love it. I love it.
So I think it really aligned with how I see my work and where I see it live.
Yeah, and I think too, when we think of digital art, a lot of people think it has to animate, or it has to move, and it has to do all these different things, but you've stayed to your style, right? Like obviously when we look at a brick building, it's not moving, but the way your work sits on the concrete or sits on the canvas, you can feel motion from it. So one thing we saw from that video that just started, you could see like your characters blink, or the bird kind of has like a feather that moves, right? But it's not these big exaggerated animations.
Yeah, and I think part of that, when I entered the space of an NFT space, I was a bit intimidated, as many artists are, when you look in all this very hyper animated work, that I'm not sure if my work is exactly that, or will it fit into that space or that world. And then I found a couple of projects, and you introduced me to a couple of projects that were very aligned with where I could see my work fit into it. So I thought it was a risk to take and to like stick to your guns,
Totally.
and curate work back in exactly what you believe in and what you stand for, and just expand that world into the NFTs. But what I realized later is that is the power that as an artist you have, is to stick to your vision, to make sure you stand out, whether it's in public art, whether it's in NFTs, whether you're creating paintings. Stick to your guns, stick to your vision, and expand it there. So I think that challenge of standing out will always be there. And I think for us, talking about like maybe we stay true to the style and have it subtle animated pieces, just to extend that story, extend that like emotion of that piece.
Definitely, yeah.
And I thought it was
as you're talking, it reminds me of when we went from the wall to limited edition prints.
Yeah.
Right? So limited edition simply means that these are numbered out of a small edition. You hand sign each one. We work with the printer. We check the color. We check the paint. We make sure it's right. And then you close that edition up. It could be 25, could be 100, whatever we say. But then it's closed to that. You sign it off, and now only 100 collectors can now collect these, or 25 collectors collect these. They couldn't collect your wall, the cement wall, right? The mural. They could stand in front of it and take a picture. It's still your work. They have it. They could frame that on their wall, right? But when we went to limited edition prints, it's like now people can collect work, put it on their wall at home, and it's still Ola's style. So how do you get from the concrete to the limited edition print? So it really, like, technology has always just like increased the artist's ability to really get out to more eyes, right? So that's why I've always been into, the street art piece, because you see it everywhere. Like I just took the train here from Ottawa. Like we live close. You're in Montreal, I'm in Ottawa. And so taking the train over, and the amount of, yes, there's graffiti, and that's its own art form, right? And then there's street art too, right? And there's installations and statues.
Well, that's one of the things that I think as an artist entering the NFT space, you get to gain a whole new skill. Like for me, knowing how to do a big mural and understanding how to take on a wall, how do I make an NFT that stands out as a thumbnail, that also speaks volumes when it's blown up huge and digital? And I think going back and forth between you and our Rapture team and making sure that it's refined, it is at its best quality, and the composition works, the colors, everything. I feel like my skill level as a digital artist went to such a new level in the past year and a half. And that's just being a creative in the art world. You have to constantly challenge yourself and expand your thinking. And I know a lot of my friends and colleagues who are coming into the NFT space and sometimes say, I'm not really good at digital work, but the future is about merging all those styles and unique approaches to your work and be able to tell your story to the world immediately. That's what I love about that space too. You create something and you have a stage to showcase it in a couple of minutes.
Exactly.
It's fantastic.
What I would say too is, now if we bring in the technology, and which is the fun piece right here, of a non-fungible token or an NFT, yes, there's digital artwork and it gets saved as a digital format.
Yeah.
And then we still now have to make it into this like token or this NFT. But the part that we found is, over the last few years, smart contracts on the blockchains have really is what made it kind of explode. And so what we've been able to do with NFTs is actually have your art interact with the smart contract. And so we've said, okay, so why don't we have this art change every hour? Maybe subtly, like just like your work does. So just like if you drove by one of your beautiful murals and the sun was setting on it, your colors will change by the oranges and the pinks and whatever. So now we have this smart contract that says, okay, Ola's #1, flamingo piece or what have you, like name whatever, but like blue heron in Seattle, let's say, whatever, we'll call it that. At 10 o'clock in the morning, it's this image. And then at 11, the smart contract goes out to get the next one. And then it pops up at 11 and you have it more orange. And then at 12, it comes and it goes pink. So now the collector can really see it in different ways that you're interpreting, your imagery. So maybe talk to how that's kind of really made a difference in not even just digital work, but like the NFT part of the digital work.
No, I think I started to see my work differently through that too, because understanding that I can merge that into one piece of art, and I'm making sure that for me it's also a mystery of whoever owns it. I don't know what time of day it is where they live, so they can experience it differently depending on when they run into the piece. But I also start to think about, how do I expand my storytelling? Because my work is very narrative, and being limited to just one piece, or whether it's a wall or whatever, I think I started to think about creation and as an artist completely differently, and also it's still limited, still refined, and I'm very curious about where that storytelling will go, because there's so many creative people that are challenging that, thinking outside the box of how they tell their own stories. So that, I think that smart contract of making sure that it's always changing has challenged me a lot as an artist, because instead of creating one piece, I'm there creating 24 or 12, and so that has been...
It's nice you're saying this, and even just like being part of this conference and meeting different people, like we were in the green room and we met a wonderful lady that's working really hard at like getting to know more about these open-minded and emerging technologies, and it really gets us thinking about how your art can be seen in so many different ways. So business start going like, how do we even play around with NFTs or whatever? And it doesn't have to be so grandiose thinking, when it's like, it can literally be a massive screen just in the lobby that changes over time, and it makes the people walking through. It doesn't have to be some big idea, but it's still the fine art. It's still the art. You would have an artist go in and paint something for your room, but now it can change, and it can work around seasons maybe, or whatever, So that's kind of some fun to your thinking and your creative.
And I was also, what I love too, it became part of creating NFTs, has also became just like another avenue for me. It's not just like I didn't drop all my work just to create digital work, but for me it's become part of that process and part of that a medium that we use now. And I think businesses should also see it as one of the aspects of a creative collaboration. So I think as an artist, you also have to think about the outside the box when you're collaborating with businesses, and how do you tell that full story. But also at the same time, as an artist, this is just another place to showcase your work. And I think it's here to stay. We all agree.
And I think we get questions a lot of the time, like, how do I get into NFTs? Like, I want to get into NFTs. I want to be part of the creative process of these NFTs. And the reality is like, well, are you an artist?
That's
like,
right.
You're an established artist. Who we work with at Art Rapture are established artists, so they've been artists. This is another medium, right? So it's just another medium we get to play with. When it's just like, I want to come in, this is all the hype. It's different. It's a different entry. It's a different vibe, right? So it's kind of what you were touching to before, is this is just a continuation of telling your story. And it kind of brings me back to, like, I'll go really history, right, with Rembrandt. So Rembrandt did these great portraits and the Night Watch and these beautiful paintings, right? But then, like, only one collector could have it. So it would be like a religious, you know, or like a big, you know, someone that ran the country or whatever, like royalty, right? And then he figured out, using this like copper plate, he could like etch it and put it in some acid and do some chemistry with it, roll ink on it, put it to paper, and now like 10 people can collect it, right? So we've always seen this like emerging way of getting more people to touch the art, see the art. And actually he did it for money. Like, this guy just wanted to make money. He made these ways of, now I can have more money, right? It's like the 1600s, right? So that is the scary part when people talk to us about, oh, are you just NFTs because it's all buzzing and there's money? It's like, that's the wrong reason to get into anything, right?
Yeah,
so for us, it's always been about the art. So how can we just use this new medium to really tell the story in a different way? So how have you heard, and now I'm asking you questions again, but like, how have you heard from your like colleagues, like your fellow artists in the art world, when they come to you and they're like, so we noticed your NFTs, like, it's like, what are you doing with that? Like, what's this about? Like, how do you kind of explain that it is still just a medium for you? It's not chasing after anything. Like, it goes to zero, it goes to hero. Like, it's another way of telling your story, you know?
Well, to be honest, the conversation has really shifted in the past year. Like, I think even a year ago, it was a bit, I don't know, it wasn't as, people were curious, but more they standoffish when it came to finding out that I'm creating more NFT work, and as if I don't know, as if it's a world that is going to come and go or whatever. But I think this year in particular, people, especially my artist colleagues, have been so much more interested, and a lot of women have come through and asked me questions and wanted to know more. And I thought that was really interesting to be actively in it, but also be accessible. Like, I'm here to talk about it, and I think having Art Rapture as a team and as a family, we all learn about it together. You have so many years of experience with NFTs, and you've taught me so much about that whole world. And so I think sharing that knowledge as fast as possible, but also I was like, check out YouTube. There's so much information on, and I'm constantly listening to podcasts, jumping on Twitter Spaces, learning from other people. And it's true, that world is extremely accessible, really. Even as inaccessible that you think it is, it's actually extremely accessible, and the information is all there. So I think it's a time for all artists, whether you're female or male. It's time to dive in. The gates are open, and I think we should do it as soon as possible and not wait, I guess.
You know, when we talk about, again, the blockchain piece and why the NFT specifically is something that works really well for artists and the collector. So with Art Rapture, we work with artists, but we also work with collectors, like evolving the collection and collecting art. And so when we talk about these different NFTs now, if someone collects an NFT from Ola or any of the artists that are doing them, it goes into their digital wallet, their digital collection. Well, now at any point, Ola could send every one of those collectors a special NFT and airdrop them, or it could be a ticket to your solo show. And you can airdrop this ticket to your solo show, but only those collectors can get it, right? So now you have like a tracking of all your collectors that love your work, and every time it moves somewhere, you can see where it goes. And that transparency is so new to the art world, because it used to be if you sold a painting or people collected the work and then maybe they sold it and someone else collected it, it's gone. Like, you never know where it goes next, where now we can follow it forever, literally. So how has that kind of made it kind of fun for you, thinking now on like the collector side and being able to actually like have an experience with them?
Well, I think it's very motivating. Like, I'm looking at my work and who owns it and how it's passed on. And what's even more interesting is seeing all the other artists around me and how their work keeps like going to different hands and evolving. So I think you're right, it's the first time where I feel I have direct contact with a lot of my collectors, and I think, and also like knowing it's in good hands. I think that's the one thing I've had shows in galleries, and I don't know particularly where my work is in 10 years from now. And I didn't think it was that important during the show, but now 10 years now has gone, and now I'm looking like, oh, I would love to see that piece again. Who has it now, and what's their experience with it? And I think one thing too is we've gotten so much more involved on Twitter and Discord, and being able to talk directly to your collectors and more on a daily rather than just once in every 3 years when you have a show, has changed your process and motivation to create more because it's immediate.
Sure.
So I think that's that part of that hype, but also I don't want artists to underestimate how much work it takes. Like some people think that digital work is faster or whatever, easier than canvas work, but I found it to be just as tough.
You're so technical with it because you can zoom into everything and you overanalyze it. And one thing, you know, we get asked a lot about what different artists, like, how do you know you're a professional artist or like a starting artist or like not really an artist, you know? And it's easiest with abstract when you see the paint that's just like thrown all over the place. Like, well, like the professional artist knows when to stop.
Right.
You know, and the other artists don't just keep throwing paint on. You know when to stop and when to kind of be in it. It brings me kind of to another point that I think we should kind of dive into, because it's still this NFT idea in business. Like the creative in business is really huge. So like, how can you use it to adapt to it as an artist and as a business using different artists? It takes me to like posters in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s where, for let's say the Grammys. So the Grammys is happening, it's gonna be huge. They get an official artist for the Grammys and they do the poster and it's like 1987, Whitney Houston's here, whatever the story is, but it's this cool Grammy poster. And then there's only like 2,500 of them maybe, but they're all around. Maybe there's even 10,000, but people start collecting those and they're like, well, that's the one from the 39th Grammys or whatever. So now with NFTs, you can have an artist, your official artist, but then they make an NFT, right? So now they come to the event and then everyone at the event collects this NFT and it stays with them and it's like on the blockchain again. And then, you know, the Grammys just has all these different things going on. That's just a random example, but those posters where artists were hired to do commercial work, but still be collectible. So have you like, I know you do a lot of things with different labels and different bags and scarves and working with big brands. Like, can you see already those like creatives moving to that NFT though?
I think it's bound to happen because when I work with clients, it's all digital work. So for me, I'm like, it only makes sense that you take advantage of both of those avenues and merge those, have your story told to everybody. And then I think that's the natural pathway in the next couple of years. I think so too.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate the fact that, you know, specifically with Ola, just so open to the ideas. It comes from obviously trust in working in different mediums together and everything, but being open to this new world. Like we're starting to talk about metaverse galleries, and not starting to talk about it, but we've been at this conference and there's some big hitters working on the metaverse in here and VR. And, you know, now we can walk into your art, you know, it's like, what? Be immersed with the worlds that you're creating. And that's where it's kind of taken it from just like this blockchain NFT thing to really like expanding the artwork into bigger things. So great chat, great chat, great chat.
Ola, I want to piggyback on this conversation.
Let's go.
Because I feel like we could literally never end. There's so many things to learn. And I just want to piggyback on something that you mentioned, that you were just mentioning about, you know, collaborating with brands. And from your both perspective experiences, what's the initial dialogue when a brand is like, okay, I want to delve into NFT, but either they're confused or they don't really know how, or they're interested, but like, what's a dialogue that you have as an artist and as like a curator with brands to kind of like bring them in the conversation? And because I guess there's a lot of education still, it's still a new world, and there's so many things still that we are constantly learning. So kind of I'm intrigued to know a bit more about your input.
Yeah, no, I think it's a tough question because everything is so new, and when we talk about business, they're quick to adapt, yes, but not quick to jump into these new emerging, especially with this volatility we've seen. It's only been like 12 years or so that crypto came out. So everyone had this, like you already said, at first when you started, everyone was like, really? What is that? And so businesses are like, we're not even close to this right now, right? But now we're kind of past that. Even with fluctuations, they realize that the technology behind it is really what makes it go. So I think our conversation with companies and branding, like it's more in the events for us, because we work with artists doing solo shows and events. So we want that event to be special in collectibles then. So you come to the event and something happens where it's special, that you get to hold this for longer. So brands just need to know really what they're looking to do. So when they come to an artist and say, we want to do this, you're okay. What are you looking to expand that to?
And why?
And why, exactly. So I think with Ola, maybe you can talk to that a little bit. When someone even comes to you for any kind of project and we want to work with you. Can you make one of those with us? You know, how do you take that and see where you can take it, you know?
Yeah, and one example that recently happened too is we got approached by an organization in New York, Seneca Women, and we created NFTs together, 6 different female artists across the world from six different countries, and we raised money for Ukraine and a woman in Ukraine, and it was immediate. We created this artwork together under the one concept. Every artist is different, and we raised great funds to go straight to the people who need it. So for me, I was like, that is exactly an example of where you have to think outside the box of how you approach it as a business.
Yeah.
Because if you, it's just a different medium, and it's exciting for artists because it didn't feel that far away from what I usually do. I'm like,
and it's also bringing you more towards a collaborative space, whether when you're, solo artists, obviously you maybe co-work with other artists on murals and stuff like that but usually when you're a traditional artist, it's usually your practice versus what you were saying. Now there's maybe more of this collaborative approach, and I'm actually intrigued to know a little bit more about, because you were mentioning earlier, women reaching out to you and saying, oh, well, the NFT space right now is mostly a male-dominated industry. So, how do we envision the future in which, women are included, and how do we envision it? And I feel like you're part of that conversation too.
Well, to be honest, I think there has been. I'm definitely not the first woman to be in that space at all. There's lots of women in that space. Some of them are anonymous. Some of them are upfront. But I think that that's changing daily. And one of the things is, I think there has to be other women examples to feel like there is space for them. So I've never I've been very present beside my work all the time. So I think that's really helped for other women to come forward and ask me questions. But truthfully, as I said, it's such a new space, but it's also all the information is there, and I found other female-led projects that I could relate to, that they became examples for me to make me feel more comfortable diving into that space. So I think for other women who are getting to that space, education, but also find examples that make you feel that excited about that space, and reach out and
if I can jump in, not being a woman in the space, right? But being on the art side of the space, right? It's art it doesn't have a title on it and says what gender made it, right? So for me, my biggest recommendation to women is just get up, get on the wall, get up, get it out, get your art out there. And you don't go out with raising a flag saying, I'm a woman and I have art out. Just be in the NFT space, be in the blockchain where 90% are men, because in fairness, they've been just on their keyboards rocking it out for the last 4 years. But like you said, it's changing every day because strong female artists are seeing others go, oh no, this is a great medium.
Setting examples.
No, it's fun. I do want to touch on one quick piece, because you mentioned Seneca Women, and we talked about the blockchain, and we talked about smart contracts and the business side. When you just mentioned Seneca Women, the reason why that was so special, we have 6 artists, 6 women, each of them made an NFT, different edition sizes, people can collect them, but there's a smart contract in place so that 20% of all funds for the rest of time, whenever that token, which is an NFT art piece, moves to another wallet for a number of money, 20% of that goes directly to Seneca Women every single time.
Yeah.
Forever.
For life.
So when we talk about the impact to a business, this is a charity, but think about it as a business side. You can have something in there in the smart contract that's written with the artists, with the collaborators. So all 6 of those women can make sure that they're on it too. So maybe 20% and 5 and 3 and 2, and then the person that sold it gets the rest. But we could never do that before, forever. So it's not like a radio singer can have that forever, right? Now an artist can be part of that creative. It's amazing.
And it's also, you just mentioned radio, but slowly but surely smart contracts are also applied in other spheres than just the visual arts, but in music and many different creative industries to kind of have that traceability also. And maybe, if I may, a last question to both of you. If you had one tip to give to someone who's either trying to get into the NFT space that doesn't know much, or maybe is wary or confused about how do I start? How do I, either as an artist, get my art out there? What's the first step? And maybe from your point of view, also from a business kind of perspective, what's one tip that you would give to people to kind of get kickstarted with NFTs? And
did you want to say your point?
Yeah, maybe I'll just, if it was one thing that I could mention out of all the things as an artist to an artist, is you have to, and I mentioned this earlier, but do not get intimidated by the amount of work out there. People say it all the time, there's so much work out there, I don't know how I fit in. Stick to your vision, stick to your style, stick to your message. And I think no matter what, you'll find an audience for it. And that should be, if that's what's stopping you, get over it. Just stick to your thing, and then I feel like that is going to be your power in whatever you do, is being authentic to yourself and your work so that you don't have to mimic anybody else.
And what I could bridge right off of that is my kind of one point to go with that is, and it's known in kind of those spaces, but it's do your own research.
Yeah.
And that's a famous line, and might be a cliche, but get in there and don't just like jump because everyone said jump. Yes, be creative, be as the artist, but now on the business side, just be smart, read a lot, reach out to artists, DM them, ask them like, where did you start? Where'd you go? Look at what they did. Reach out to the actual established works and not the anons. You can be anon, but reach out to the ones that are publicly saying who they are and what they're doing, and you'll get the best kind of information.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up our Arts and NFT showcase. Thanks to everyone here at EAI in presence at the Palais des Congrès or virtually. Thanks for joining us. This was Ola Volo and Ryan Watson. That's a wrap.
Thank you.
Guys.
That was awesome.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
watching.